Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back into a world where the streets reek of rot, your feet are perpetually wet, and the only thing worse than the food is the fashion. You're about to spend a full 24 hours in medieval Europe, and trust me, by hour 2, you'll be fantasizing about your memory foam mattress and a functioning toilet. Let's paint the scene. You blink open your eyes to the hazy gray of early dawn. It's cold. Not, oh, I forgot to turn on the heater. Cold, more like, I might lose a toe. Cold. You're lying on a straw-stuffed sack that smells faintly of goat and definitely of someone else's body. There's no pillow, just your arm, which is already asleep. Your nose twitches. Is that urine? Yes. Yes, it is. Mixed with chimney soot, stale cabbage, and something unidentifiable but menacing. Welcome to a typical peasant hut in the 14th century. The roof is thatched, meaning rain drips through in inconvenient places. The floor is dirt. Literal dirt. There's no insulation, and the one small window, if you're lucky enough to have one, is just a hole with a wooden shutter, no glass. Outside, fog clings to everything like a damp wool sweater. You hear a rooster crowing, but it sounds more like a scream. It might be a scream. Your bedmates? Entirely too many. The hut isn't just yours. Extended family, a chicken, and possibly a pig are sharing this space. Yes, pigs lived indoors. Their body heat was considered helpful. Cozy. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and the time you're listening in the comments. I love seeing where everyone's tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You rise, reluctantly, stretching your sore limbs. Immediately, your feet squelch into something mushy. Mud? Animal waste? Both? Doesn't matter, you're barefoot, and shoes are a luxury. If you're lucky, you might find a pair of turn shoes, thin leather flats that offer roughly the same protection as a wet pancake. Your first task? Letting out the animals. You unlatch the crude wooden door and step outside, greeted by a wall of fog and a scent you can only describe as fermented barnyard. Every house around you is smoking, chimneys belching out black plumes into the dawn air, because fire is the only defense against the biting chill. Historians still argue whether most peasants actually hated their lives or simply didn't know better. Sure, they had tight-knit communities and a few feast days, but you, modern time traveler, have seen TikTok and own socks. You're suffering. As you pass your neighbor's home, you nod. They nod. You attempt a cheery good morning, but they just stare at you. Words were fewer then, especially before breakfast. People didn't waste energy on pleasantries unless they had ale. You cough. The air is thick with wood smoke and the unmistakable scent of chamber pot contents being tossed into the street. Yes, that's a thing. Garde-la! Someone shouts, Scottish for, look out for the filth! And a second later, a suspicious splash echoes behind you. Close 1. The main street of the village is more of a squishy trench flanked by wattle and daub houses. It's technically called a midden, which is just a fancy word for a giant pile of old garbage. It functions as sidewalk, sewer, and playground. Children chase a hoop. A man relieves himself against a tree. A mangy dog eyes you suspiciously. You wander toward the village green, which isn't green at all. It's brown, churned up by cart wheels, hooves, and years of communal use. A few women are already at the communal bakehouse, kneading dark, grainy dough into lumpy loaves. You consider asking for some, but you haven't got a single coin. You have no purse. You don't even know your name yet. Suddenly, a man in a long robe and a wide hat walks by, swinging a censer of incense and muttering prayers. He's the village priest. You hope he's blessing the air, but honestly, it seems like he's trying not to pass out from the smell. Fun fact, incense wasn't just spiritual, it masked the stench of unwashed bodies and open latrines. Quirky bonus? People sometimes stuff dried herbs into their nostrils to survive the worst of it. You might want to try that. The sun is higher now, burning off some of the fog, and revealing the architectural horrors in better light. Roofs sag. Walls lean. Some buildings are propped up with literal sticks. If you touch anything, it might crumble. So don't. You pass a house where someone is giving birth. No hospitals, no privacy, no epidurals. Just a lot of screaming and a midwife yelling, "Push!" in medieval French. You walk faster. Here's something you didn't expect: chickens everywhere. On roofs, in carts, strutting across the mud like they own the place. One glares at you as if to say, "City slicker." You nod respectfully. Now, one last sensory gift. Imagine this, a faint, droning buzz in the distance. Bees? Oh no. That's the tannery. Hides are being soaked in a mix of water, lime, and dog feces to soften them. Leather working in medieval towns meant constant exposure to revolting substances. You can almost taste it. Honestly, you've made it about 2 hours, and you're already wondering if there's a time machine escape hatch behind one of these mossy sheds. Spoiler, there isn't. You're hungry. Desperately, ravenously hungry. The kind of hunger that makes you think, I could really go for a granola bar right now. But in medieval Europe, breakfast isn't exactly a thing. Not for peasants, anyway. Nobles might wake up to honeyed oatcakes and warmed cider, but you? You're lucky if you can scrounge a crust of yesterday's black bread and a sip of tepid ale. You sit outside your hut, eyeing a scrap of that bread. It's dense. Heavy. Possibly weapon grade. You knock on it with your knuckle just to check. It makes a dull, worrying thunk. That's because it's riddled with ground-up barley, rye, and a little something extra. Ever heard of ergot? It's a fungus that infects grains and can cause hallucinations or convulsions. Historians still argue whether ergot was behind past outbreaks of dancing mania and witch hysteria. So yes, even your toast is trying to kill you. You gnaw on the bread anyway. It tastes like damp wood with a hint of existential dread. There's a thin smear of something on it. Lard, probably. Butter is for rich people. Or nobles. Or rich nobles. You are none of these. You look around for water, but unless someone caught fresh rain, it's safer to stick with the ale. It's weak, brewed quickly, and served warm. Doesn't matter. You're just grateful it hasn't got a frog floating in it, which apparently happens often enough that no one's surprised. Speaking of teeth, yours hurt. All of them. Even the ones that shouldn't. That's because in this world, dental hygiene is as foreign as avocado toast. Toothbrushes don't exist. People chew on twigs, or rub their gums with salt and ash, if they bother at all. Most adults have a mouthful of rot, abscesses, and a couple of brave molars hanging on for dear life. You catch a glimpse of your reflection in a murky puddle. It's not great. Someone walks past you and offers a mostly toothless grin. You're not alone. But you can't just sit there. You're expected to contribute. Do something. You're not sure what yet, but you hear your name, your medieval name, shouted by someone who sounds impatient and mildly threatening. Probably the head of your household, which is a fancy term for a person who yells at you to move hay. You stumble off in search of a chore. This is where you realize how utterly unprepared you are. Your muscles are screaming, and you haven't even done anything yet. Everything is manual. Every bucket, every sack, every tool is heavy, poorly balanced, and coated in something unidentifiable. You try to milk a goat. The goat doesn't like you. You try to sweep the hearth, but the broom is made of sticks and seems to be shedding more than it's sweeping. You attempt to start a fire with flint and steel and end up giving yourself a minor burn. Well done. You sigh. This was supposed to be a quiet, sleepy walk through history. Instead, you're one cold breeze away from tears. Let's talk more about food, or lack of it. Today's first meal might not happen until mid-morning, if at all. And it's more of a communal stew than a proper breakfast. Pottage, they call it. A chunky mess of root vegetables, grains, and if you're wildly lucky, a shred of bacon rind that's been floating in there since last week. Everyone eats from the same pot. With their hands. Or with wooden spoons, if they own one. There are no napkins. There are barely tables. You crouch by the fire, dipping your crust into the pot, and try not to cry from the lack of seasoning. Salt is expensive. Spices are mythical. One of the elders tells you that nobles eat peacocks and swans stuffed with smaller birds. You glance down at your cabbage water and sigh. Once again, life reminds you, you are not a noble. Here's a quirky tidbit. Medieval people believed that eating too early in the day was gluttonous. Breaking the fast was seen as a necessity, not a pleasure. So that dream of pancakes and espresso? Dead on arrival. Also dead? Your energy. Because remember, coffee hasn't reached Europe yet. That doesn't happen until the 16th century. So no lattes. No espresso shots. Just ale, mead, or warm goat's milk if you're into that sort of thing. You glance at the sun, trying to estimate the time. Maybe mid-morning? You're already exhausted. You sit on a log, and immediately a beetle crawls out of your sleeve. You don't even flinch anymore. That's just life now. Someone walks past carrying a sack of grain on their back. It looks impossibly heavy. You consider offering help, then remember your noodle arms and quietly stay seated. Now is probably a good moment to mention the plague. Not because you have it, yet, but because it lingers in the background like a medieval jump scare. Depending on your century, it might already have hit, be currently hitting, or just about to hit. Sanitation is non-existent, rodents are everywhere, and fleas are basically your new roommates. You scratch your arm. Just paranoia. Probably. The older woman beside you spits into the fire, muttering something about demons. You nod politely. Medieval people often blamed illness on spiritual causes. Imbalance of the humors. Sin. Witchcraft. Not germs. Germ theory is a few hundred years away. Which brings us to another debate. Historians still argue whether the average medieval peasant had any real understanding of cause and effect when it came to sickness. Some evidence says yes, folk remedies, herbal knowledge, quarantine measures. Others say no, they thought thunder made you sick. The jury's out. But back to you. You stand up, stretch your aching back, and feel the weight of time pressing down like 1,000 damp cloaks. You've been awake for maybe 4 hours, and you've eaten bread, lard, and despair. Your stomach growls anyway. The smell of manure drifts across the green again, sweetened slightly by someone baking onions. You try to follow it. Maybe they'll share. Or maybe, just maybe, you'll discover what your next job is, and pray it doesn't involve anything with hooves. You've made it maybe 5 hours into medieval life, and guess what? You're already a criminal. Not in the cool, outlaw with the sword way. More like, oops, your tunic is too nice, and you walked on the wrong side of the street. Let's start with your outfit. You're wearing whatever you woke up in, a rough wool tunic, stained breeches, and something that might once have been linen but now looks like it went through a compost heap. Seems harmless, right? Wrong. Medieval Europe had sumptuary laws, strict rules controlling what people of different social classes were allowed to wear. If your belt buckle is a little too shiny or your cloak looks fancier than your neighbor's, that's a punishable offense. You're not royalty. You're barely peasantry. And that embroidery on your sleeve? Definitely illegal. A town crier walks by ringing a bell. By order of the king, he shouts, then trails off into something about wool tariffs and bread weights. You don't understand half of it, and that's the problem. You're supposed to follow the rules, but the rules change depending on the day, the region, and whether the local bailiff woke up grumpy. You wander into the village square and immediately step over a pile of something that may or may not be human. No one notices. A man is being shouted at for selling loaves that are light, meaning he skimped on flour. He could be whipped or fined for cheating customers. And who gets to decide? Probably the reeve, a local official elected by the manor but not necessarily liked by anyone. A little boy runs past you, barefoot and gleeful, waving a stick like a sword. "Stop that!" someone yells. Playing in the street can be frowned upon, especially if the local lord is passing by. The idea of public order is pretty serious. Disorder, like a child with too much energy, could be seen as rebellion brewing. Better to keep things dull and obedient. You make the mistake of standing in front of the church doorway for too long. An older woman tuts at you. Why? Because today's a holy day, and you're not supposed to loiter where people are trying to enter from Massachusetts. You're also not wearing anything to cover your head, and if you're presenting as female, that's definitely a problem. Social norms are so tangled and specific that just existing feels like a constant test you weren't warned about. You decide to leave the square and wander down a narrow alley. This seems safer, until someone accuses you of stealing firewood. You try to explain, but they're not listening. Everyone knows that common land is actually claimed by half the village, and your hand just got a little too close to someone's bundle of kindling. Technically speaking, that's theft. Even if it wasn't on purpose. Even if you're just cold. Historians still argue whether medieval justice was arbitrary or just heavily localized. Some say it was based on long-standing custom and precedent. Others suggest that it mostly depended on who you offended and how much they liked you. You escape the alley with your dignity mostly intact, but your stomach's in knots. Not from hunger this time, from anxiety. You're constantly looking over your shoulder now, unsure if there's a rule you're breaking just by walking. Let's take a moment to appreciate one of the weirdest laws, curfews. Yes, medieval towns had them. The town bell would ring, and you were expected to be home, with your hearth fire extinguished or covered. Open flames were a major hazard. Entire villages could go up in smoke. But it also doubled as social control. No loitering. No suspicious activity. If you're caught out past curfew without a good reason, you're fined, or worse, jailed in the stocks. You hear a story from a nearby farmer about someone being publicly whipped for singing a bawdy song in church. The song? About a goat. Was it funny? Probably. Was it illegal? Definitely. Humor is dangerous here. Anything irreverent is considered flirting with heresy. Let's add heresy to your growing list of things to avoid. You don't have to be a witch, yet to be in trouble with the church. Just asking why the priest has such a nice robe could earn you a visit from the local bishop's enforcers. A quirky tidbit for you: in some towns, farting during Mass was a finable offense. Yes, the passing of wind could be recorded in official court rolls. Imagine that showing up on your record. Sir, you've been charged with blasphemous flatulence. You pass a small pillory, 2 wooden boards with holes for securing someone's head and hands. It's currently empty, but fresh fruit remnants suggest someone was recently shamed there. Stocks and pillories were public punishment for minor crimes like gossip, drunkenness, or baking your bread too small. And yes, sometimes people just threw things. Moldy apples, insults, dead fish. All part of the fun. Another law you just violated? You smiled at the reeve. Smiling isn't illegal, but eye contact with a superior can be interpreted as cheekiness. And cheekiness? Borderline treasonous. You quickly avert your gaze, hoping your awkward grin didn't cost you a finger. You hear a bell in the distance. Not a church bell this time, but a warning bell: there's been a theft. A group of men with cudgels jog by. Someone's sheep has gone missing. You're glad you didn't pet that one earlier. Guilt by association is a very real thing here. Historians often debate how strictly laws were enforced in rural towns. Some records show a surprising amount of tolerance. Minor crimes forgiven, punishments delayed. Others suggest brutality was the norm. Public whippings, mutilations, branding. Depends on the place, the time, and who's watching. You find yourself back near your hut. It's not safe, but it's familiar. You sit, trying not to look like you're loitering. You're tired of trying to look innocent. Everything you do seems vaguely illegal. The village priest passes by again, giving you a suspicious glance. You nod, unsure if nodding is allowed. Probably depends on your tone. Here's the thing no one tells you: surviving in medieval Europe isn't just about staying fed or warm. It's about knowing how to exist, how to dress, when to speak, who to avoid. It's a minefield of invisible lines, all ready to trip you up. And your 24 hours aren't even halfway done. You're still alive, which is an accomplishment. But now you're about to discover the true horror of medieval existence, bodily functions. You've made it to midday, and nature calls. Loudly. Uncomfortably. You try to ignore it, but the pressure builds. Eventually, you accept the inevitable. It's time to go. But go where exactly? Let's start with your options. You could walk into the woods. That's probably your best bet. There's no official public latrine in your village unless you're near a monastery or a bigger town. So, into the bushes you go, careful not to trip over tree roots, curious pigs, or someone else doing the exact same thing. Privacy is an abstract concept here. You squat awkwardly, trying to remember which plants are safe for wiping. Hint, it's not nettles. You will find out the hard way. Also, watch out for night soil collectors. Yes, that's a real job. People actually go around scooping human waste to use as fertilizer. It's good for crops. It's also why nothing tastes quite right. Back in the village, there's an open ditch running behind some homes. It's not a stream. It's not a drain. It's the gutter, and everything ends up there: wastewater, animal guts, spoiled milk, broken dreams. The stench is indescribable. The flies are aggressive. And yet kids splash around in it sometimes. You make a mental note never to drink anything again. Medieval hygiene is a fascinating contradiction. Bathing exists, sure. People like being clean. But access to warm water and privacy? Not so much. If you're lucky, your village has a public bathhouse. But those are going out of style by the late Middle Ages, mostly because people start worrying they encourage sin. You know, the steamy, naked kind of sin. Still, some folks bathe on Saturday nights out of habit or superstition. You, however, have not bathed. And you smell like boiled turnips left in a boot. So does everyone else. You'd think that would make it easier. It doesn't. Your own odor is now your constant enemy. You try to wash your hands with a bit of water from a wooden bucket. It's cloudy, with a film on top that might be grease. Soap is rare and expensive, often made from animal fat and ashes. You use a handful of sand instead, scrubbing between your fingers like you're exfoliating for survival. It sort of works. Sort of. Here's a weird little tidbit. Some nobles believe that too much bathing weakened the body and opened the pores to disease. So instead of soap and water, they just layer on perfumes. Lavender, rosewater, or, in truly tragic cases, crushed musk glands from animals. Medieval fashion: come for the cloaks, stay for the body odor. You step outside and breathe through your mouth. Someone nearby is cleaning out a chamber pot. It's exactly what it sounds like. A ceramic bowl that people keep under their beds. Every morning, someone, usually the youngest or lowest-ranking person in the household, gets to empty it. Into the gutter. Or the woods. Or wherever it feels most tragic. You glance at your own home. There's no privy. Just a dark corner and some old straw, which you now realize you've been sleeping next to. Excellent. Historians still argue whether peasants in the Middle Ages had designated outhouses. Some evidence suggests yes, basic pits with wooden covers. Others believe most waste disposal was improvisational. A sort of go where the goats aren't system. You hear a shout from across the field. Someone's yelling about a pig. Again. Pigs are often used as waste disposers. Medieval garbage men with snouts. They'll eat anything, including, anything. It's both horrifying and efficient. You wander over to a well to rinse your face. It looks promising. Cool stone, a sturdy rope, even a bucket. You're halfway through splashing your cheeks when someone screams, "Don't drink that!" Apparently, someone dumped a dead squirrel down there last week. This is not an isolated incident. Wells are communal, and people treat them with a shocking lack of respect. No wonder illness spreads like wildfire. Speaking of wildfire, did you know that people sometimes use dried animal dung as fuel? You do now. And you smell it constantly. Burning cow patties. Roasted horse nuggets. Nothing says home like inhaling flaming feces. Here's your medieval laundry setup: a wooden tub, some cold water, lye soak, if you're lucky, and a whole lot of scrubbing. Clothes are rarely washed more than once a season. You air them out, beat them with a stick, maybe sprinkle some herbs inside if you're feeling extra. You're still wearing the same tunic you woke up in. It's damp. It's itchy. You've stopped asking why. The church bell rings again. Time for prayers. You're not especially religious, but skipping prayers looks suspicious. And suspicious things are how people end up accused of witchcraft, heresy, or general weirdness. You walk toward the church, trying to smooth your tunic and pat down your hair. There are no mirrors. You catch your reflection in a polished shield someone left leaning on a bench. You look like a raccoon who lost a bar fight. Perfect. Inside the church, it's dim and cold. The air smells of incense, candle wax, and wet wool. You kneel on the hard floor, pretending to understand Latin. No one actually speaks it except the clergy, but it makes everything sound very important. You mumble along, wondering if you're accidentally swearing allegiance to a goat. And here's a kicker: churches didn't always have seating. Pews come later. You're either standing or kneeling, often for hours. So now your knees hurt, your back hurts, and you're 60% sure the guy next to you just passed gas. When prayers are done, you shuffle out with the crowd. Back into the sunshine. Back into the stench. Someone hands you a small roll, leftover from an offering. You eat it gratefully. It's the cleanest thing you've touched all day. A kid runs past covered in what looks like mud. You hope it's mud. You head back toward your hut, muscles sore, skin sticky, senses overwhelmed. You've now experienced medieval sanitation in all its horror, and you're still not even halfway through the day. And to think, you used to complain about low water pressure. Afternoon settles over the village like a wet wool blanket, warm but slightly sour. You've made it this far, which is impressive, but now it's time to face your greatest challenge yet: work. Not the grab a coffee and open your laptop kind of work. No. This is backbreaking, barefoot, sunburn and blisters work, the kind that makes you reevaluate your entire relationship with gravity. First order of business: you're a peasant, so that means field labor. You're expected to contribute to the manor's productivity, which mostly means helping on the domain, the lord's personal farmland. You don't own it. You don't benefit from it. But you do get to sweat all over it. You're handed a hoe and pointed toward a field that stretches out farther than your modern knees would prefer. No machinery. No shortcuts. Just your sore body and a lot of dirt. Your job today? Weeding. You'd think that sounds easy. You'd be wrong. Medieval weeds have attitude. They bite, they cling, and they seem to multiply when you're not looking. The sun's baking your neck. Your back starts to scream within minutes. No one's talking. Just grunts and groans and the occasional. When someone finds a molehill, you spot a beetle the size of a thumb crawling up your leg and pretend it's not happening. Here's a historical nugget. While most peasants were tied to the land through systems like serfdom, some managed to lease land or buy small plots. But don't get your hopes up, you're not that lucky. You're the unpaid intern of the medieval economy. Every so often, a steward rides by to check that everyone's working. He doesn't help, of course. He just watches from horseback with that classic "I'm better than you" posture that really makes you want to throw a turnip at his head. You glance at the other workers. Some are barefoot. Most are sunburnt. A few are singing in a low, repetitive chant, not for joy, but rhythm. Singing keeps the mind from crumbling. You try to hum along, then give up. Your rhythm is all wrong. Your host strikes a rock. Your hands are blistered already. In the distance, someone yells about sheep. Again. You look up and realize there's an entire flock loose near the manor fence. Herding animals is a full-time job, but everyone shares it in pieces. Today, it's not your turn, but that doesn't stop a goat from casually headbutting your leg. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were truly miserable, or just tired all the time. Some sources suggest communal life offered a sense of belonging and shared purpose. Others describe villages as brutally hierarchical, with little room for rest or personal growth. Based on how your spine feels right now, you're leaning toward the miserable camp. You take a break and sit on a fallen log. Big mistake. A passing overseer scolds you. Breaks at sunset, he grunts. That's at least 4 hours away. You stand again, sighing, and feel the weight of your own clothes pulling you down. Wool traps heat like a grudge. You try to chat with someone nearby, hoping for human connection. You ask about their name, and they just stare at you like you've grown a second head. First, it's rude to talk while working. Second, names aren't always used casually, especially not with strangers. You eventually learn he's called Tom O'Hay, not because it's his last name, but because he sleeps in the hay barn. Another fringe fact for you: some peasants use their hands or feet to measure land. Like literally pacing it out with their actual limbs. It was called footing a boundary. This sounds quaint until you realize how easy it is to mess up when your foot is different from the guy before you. The rhythm of the day is governed by bells. A bell rings for midday prayers, for mealtimes, for curfew. No watches, no alarms, just tones carried on the wind. You hear one now. Time to trudge to the edge of the field for your meal. Meal is generous. It's more of a sad picnic. You're handed a lump of coarse bread, a smear of sour cheese, and a small cup of something vaguely beer-like. It's called small ale, barely alcoholic, often safer than water. It tastes like if you boiled barley in a sock. Twice. You eat in silence. People sit in little clumps, chewing with the urgency of survival. No utensils. You rip your bread with your teeth and hope it doesn't crack one. Dental care, in case you were wondering, is non-existent. Your best option is hope your teeth outlive your 30s. You remember the bread law from earlier, the one about loaves needing to be a certain weight. You now understand why. This loaf is barely a mouthful. You wonder if you can sneak a second. You can't. Someone's watching. The afternoon labor is more of the same. Weeding. Hoeing. Occasionally chasing an angry chicken. You find yourself repeating a prayer under your breath, not because you're pious, but because it's the only Latin you know, and it helps the hours pass. Here's a sensory detail you weren't expecting: your sweat burns. Not from heat, but because every tiny scrape on your skin becomes a little sting factory. Salt meets abrasion, and your body becomes a medieval chemistry experiment. Late in the day, you're assigned to help repair a wattle fence. This means weaving sticks between wooden posts until it's strong enough to hold back livestock. It's like basket weaving, except the stakes are higher and the basket can kick you in the ribs. You try to look helpful, but your fence collapses twice. Someone else fixes it while shaking their head. A scholarly debate still lingers around peasant leisure time. Some argue that aside from feast days and holy days, peasants worked constantly. Others believe there were moments of rest and celebration woven throughout the calendar. Either way, today is not one of those days. As the sun begins to dip, your body protests every movement. You smell like fear, cheese, and despair. The field finally empties, and you drag your feet back toward the village. You pass the manor on your way. It towers over your hut like a smug stone reminder that someone always has it better. Smoke curls from its chimney. A dog lounges on the steps. You hear laughter from inside. They're eating meat, probably. And warm food. And no one's poked by goats during dinner. You reach your hut, collapse into the itchy straw pile that pretends to be your bed, and try not to think about tomorrow. You've officially worked a medieval day. And somehow, you're still not done. The sky has turned that murky kind of gray that lets you know the sun is setting, but not soon enough. You've been up since dawn, and every joint in your body is throwing a personal protest. Still, the day isn't over. Not even close. Because now it's time for something equally exhausting in its own way: dinner and domestic chores. Yes, after surviving the filth and fields, now you get to cook. If you were hoping for a quick delivery order or a frozen pizza, please adjust your expectations back about 800 years. Your evening meal is called supper. And while that sounds vaguely comforting, the contents are less so. You've got some barley, a withered onion, and a bit of dried herbs you've been hoarding like medieval oregano gold. There's also something that might be a carrot, or might be a very small, orange club. It smells rooty. There's no kitchen. Just a fireplace, really more of a firehole in the center of your hut, with a small iron pot hanging from a hook. You stoke the fire using kindling you gathered weeks ago and try to get something boiling. The smoke curls up toward a hole in the roof, your only chimney. Most of it, however, curls back into your face. You choke a little. Your eyes water. Your dinner now tastes like ash and tears. Welcome to pottage, a thick soup-stew porridge hybrid that's the backbone of the peasant diet. It's basically edible mud, and everyone eats it, sometimes for weeks straight. You stir it with a wooden spoon so splintery it probably qualifies as a weapon. A fringe little detail for you. Some households kept a pottage pot simmering constantly, adding ingredients day after day, never fully emptying it. It's like a cursed cauldron of leftovers. There's a good chance your meal tonight contains traces of last Tuesday's parsnip. If you're lucky, someone traded for a bit of pork fat or salted herring at the village market, and it's floating in the stew like an oily ghost. The occasional flea hops off the table and onto your arm. You flick it away and pretend it's a sign of affection. You eat with your hands, using a slab of stale bread as both plate and utensil. These are called trenchers, and by the time you're done, it's soaked through and barely chewable. Still, waste not, want not. Historians still argue whether medieval meals were truly this grim, or if modern minds just romanticized noble banquets too much. Some say peasants could get quite creative with herbs, fermentation, or wild mushrooms. Others point out that, when all you have is cabbage and rainwater, there's only so much magic you can work. After supper, you clean up. This means wiping your hands on your tunic, then rinsing the pot with cold water from a jug. Soap? If you're lucky. Otherwise, it's grit and bark scrubbing, essentially just bullying the dirt into submission. Now, you might assume it's bedtime. But nope. Still more to do. Evening chores. Your favorite. You grab a wooden bucket and head toward the communal well. The sun's low, and the ground is slick from the day's trampled grass. Someone else is already there, struggling with the rope. You take a turn lowering the bucket, hoping there's no dead animal in it this time. When it comes up, it's heavy and splashes your feet. You're now wet and itchy. Great. Back home, you light a tallow candle. Tallow is made from animal fat, and yes, it smells exactly how you think it does. You try not to gag. The light flickers weakly, casting shadows that make your hut look haunted by a peasant poltergeist. You settle in for a moment of peace, maybe even some conversation if you live with others. Families sleep in one room, share one bed, and essentially exist in a cozy pile. If you have children, they're underfoot. If you have a spouse, you're both exhausted. If you live alone, the silence buzzes. One kid asks for a story. You recite a tale you heard last market day, something about a talking cat that steals sausages. They laugh. You do too, even if it's weak. These are the little comforts that get you through. You check the roof. It's still leaking in the corner. The straw you stuffed there hasn't helped. You make a note to ask the thatcher for help. He'll probably say yes, in exchange for labor. That's the economy here, favors traded for bruises. Outside, the night sounds begin. Frogs. Distant howls. The shuffle of animals getting comfortable in their pens. Or trying to escape. You suddenly remember you forgot to latch the goat shed. You groan. Throw on your cloak. Stumble outside into the mud. The goat is halfway to the herb garden already. You chase it, bare feet slapping through puddles, muttering curses that your ancestors probably invented. You finally corner the beast, drag it back by its horns, and secure the latch. The goat looks smug. As you head back inside, you look up at the sky. There are stars. Real ones. Clear and countless. That's one small consolation. No pollution, no city lights. Just a vast, brilliant dome of night. You let yourself enjoy that for a second before your neck cramps. Inside, it's time to wind down. This means curling up in the straw mattress, maybe with a wool blanket if you've got one. You're still in your clothes. No pajamas. No brushing teeth. Just lying down and hoping nothing crawls over your face while you sleep. Here's a weird cultural tidbit. Some people in the Middle Ages practiced something called two sleeps. They'd sleep for a few hours, wake up around midnight, do light chores or pray, then go back to sleep until dawn. You're hoping that's not your fate tonight, but your aching body might have other plans. You hear something scratching in the thatch above. A rat? A bird? A rat bird? You pull the blanket tighter. Someone outside lets out a belch so deep it rattles the door. Charming! As your eyes close, your last thought is simple. You've survived another day. You've dug, weeded, cooked, cleaned, chased, sweat, itched, and eaten mush with a side of sadness. And somehow, this was considered a normal day. You wake up before the sun, which seems deeply unfair. Your body is sore in places you didn't know had muscles. Straw clings to your clothes and face. The fire's gone cold, and your breath fogs in the air. You shiver. Welcome to the joys of medieval mornings, where comfort is a myth and warmth is for nobles. Outside, the village is already stirring. Someone's dog is barking like it personally has taxes to pay. A rooster crows with the smug satisfaction of a creature that doesn't have to hoe fields. You throw on your cloak, scratchy, slightly damp, and step outside to face the day. But something's different today. There's tension in the air. You hear the word, Lord, whispered a few times. Ah, that's why. The manor lord is coming for an inspection. Cue the medieval version of a workplace panic. The manor lord, your feudal overlord, is a figure you mostly try to avoid thinking about. He owns the land you work, controls the taxes you pay, and can basically ruin your life with a bad mood. His visits are rare, which makes them terrifying. Everyone's bustling around like terrified ants. Even the chickens seem more obedient. Let's take a step back and look at this little feudal pyramid you're stuck in. You're at the bottom, obviously. Above you are villains, lucky peasants who rent land, then freemen. Rare but legally cooler, then reeves and bailiffs, glorified middle managers, and finally, the Lord himself. Think of him as a human pile of privilege in fur-lined boots. You overhear someone say the manor court might be held today. That's a big deal. It's not a courtroom like in modern shows, with gavels and dramatic objections. It's more like a lawn meeting where local disputes are settled, punishments are handed out, and everyone tries very hard not to sneeze in the Lord's direction. And guess what? You've been summoned. No, you're not in trouble. Probably. But your name, well, your identifier, like Tom O'Hay's lodger, or Willow's eldest, was on the list posted outside the Tide Barn. You're to present yourself, and hopefully, stay standing the whole time. Historians still argue whether manor courts were fair instruments of local justice or petty displays of aristocratic power. Some evidence suggests they offered real legal resolution for peasants. Others note they could be wildly biased, especially when ale was involved. You don't get to debate. You just get to go. Before the court, though, the village has to look respectable. So your first job of the day? Sweeping the common path. Not with a broom, no. That'd be too easy. You've got a bundle of twigs tied with twine. You shuffle dirt more than sweep it, but hey, appearance is everything when you're expecting royalty-adjacent boots to walk through. You help hang fresh herbs near the doors, mostly to mask the scent of everything else. The herbal bundles are a mix of lavender, thyme, and something that smells like crushed anxiety. You even wash your face using cold water from the well. You're practically glowing. Then he arrives. You hear him before you see him, hooves clopping, dogs barking, someone yelling. Make way! Villagers line up, trying to look both humble and clean. The Lord appears, flanked by retainers and his steward. He's wearing a velvet tunic that probably costs more than your entire house. His boots are polished. His beard is groomed. He smells like wealth and roasted meat. He doesn't make eye contact. He does, however, dismount and walk to the manor courtyard, where the manor court is about to begin. You follow, trying not to step on anything unfortunate. The court starts with proclamations, rules repeated aloud for the villagers, like, No cutting wood from the Lord's forest without leave. And all pigs must be ringed. That last one is not about weddings. It's about putting a ring in a pig's nose so it can't root up the Lord's pasture. Welcome to medieval priorities. Then come the disputes. One man accuses another of stealing firewood. A woman claims her neighbor's sheep trampled her garden. Someone else is fined for failing to clean their ditch properly. That's a real thing. Ditch maintenance was mandatory. You're now retroactively guilty of several ditch-related crimes. You're called up, finally. Turns out, the bailiff just wants you to confirm you helped on the domain during the last 2 weeks. You nod. He nods. The scribe squints at you and writes something down in a record you'll never see. That's it. You're dismissed. Still, you made eye contact with a noble today. That's like touching the moon. Here's a fun fringe fact. Some lords issue tokens or tallies as proof of attendance or payment. If you'd had to pay a fine today, you might have been handed a wooden stick with notches on it to prove you settled up. Like a sad, splintery receipt. After the court, there's a small feast, for them, not you. Roasted meats, warm bread, wine. You sniff the air and your stomach makes a noise loud enough to scare a nearby chicken. You're not invited to that meal, obviously. Instead, you and the other peasants are allowed to pick through what's left in the field. It's called gleaning, and it's one of the few sanctioned ways to legally gather leftover grain. You fill your apron with a handful of sad wheat stalks and try to look grateful. You overhear some older villagers grumble about the court. One mutters about the taxes. Another about the steward's favoritism. There's even a quiet joke about the Lord's new beard style, something about it looking like a squirrel fell asleep on his chin. You laugh. Quietly. You're not that brave. As the noble party leaves, the village exhales. The tension loosens. Kids start playing again. Goats resume their campaign of general chaos. You head back to your hut, tired in a completely different way than usual. You didn't hoe a field today. But you did survive bureaucracy and fur trim. You sit down, watch the light shift through the gaps in your wall, and realize that power, even in a place this old, still walks tall while everyone else kneels. Still, the air smells like rosemary and relief. You'll take it. You stretch. You yawn. You consider going back to bed for another hour. Or, let's be real, 6. But the morning has other plans. Yesterday's noble inspection left a mess, and while the manor court is done and the Lord's perfumed entourage has trotted away, your life hasn't magically improved. If anything, it's gotten weirder. Because today is market day. And you, lucky duck that you are, get to go. Market day is a big deal in a medieval village. It's not every day you can leave your muddy corner of the world and wander into the heart of town, where gossip, barter, and the faint hope of entertainment swirl together like a pot of overcooked stew. If you're a peasant, it's the closest thing to a vacation you'll get, except this vacation comes with livestock dodging and a 40% chance of pickpocketing. You sling a basket over your shoulder. It's got the usual peasant currency: eggs, herbs, a bit of rough woven cloth, maybe a small wheel of goat cheese you've been saving for just this kind of special occasion. You also carry a handful of coins, though they're so small and thin they feel like metal dandruff. The walk to market is long, and your shoes, if you're wearing any, aren't exactly orthopedic. You pass others along the road, carts creaking, pigs squealing, a child carrying a chicken like it's a baby. You nod at each other in that "we're all in this together" kind of way. And then the sounds hit first. The clanging of iron. The shouting of traders. The bray of donkeys. The unmistakable smell of fish that's definitely past its prime. You've arrived at the village market. Now, let's set the scene. Rickety stalls, mud everywhere, loud barterers yelling over each other, dogs weaving underfoot in search of dropped morsels. Children dart between adults, and someone is already drunk on weak ale by noon. The air is thick with smoke from open fire pits, and the occasional whiff of roasted meat. Your stomach growls, again. You edge into the crowd, clutching your basket like it's a family heirloom. First stop, the cloth merchant. You need thread. The merchant eyes your cheese. You negotiate. using a combination of gestures, exaggerated facial expressions, and hopeful grunts. You walk away with thread and slightly less cheese. Victory. Historians still argue whether medieval markets were bastions of free trade or tightly regulated chaos. Some say guilds kept everything orderly, others claim it was the Wild West with onions. One thing's for sure, if you want something weird, this is where to find it. Take the guy selling miracle potions in bottles that are clearly reused ink jars. He says one can cure gout, remove warts, and invigorate the humors. Another man peddles dried frogs, claiming they protect against toothaches. And don't even get us started on the guy in the corner who swears his ferret can predict the weather. You consider buying a baked apple. It's warm, sticky, and smells of cinnamon and street dust. You eat it anyway. It's the best thing you've tasted all week. Possibly all year. Then comes the part you've been dreading, taxes. A man in a faded tunic and a pouch that jingles ominously approaches. He's the reeve, the local tax collector, and he knows exactly what you owe. You don't argue. You hand over 2 eggs and a sliver of cheese. He nods, adds your name to a wax tablet, and moves on. You feel slightly robbed and moderately relieved. Which is just how taxes feel, regardless of century. You spot someone from your village, Old Meg. She's selling herbal remedies from a patchy blanket. She waves you over, shows you her latest concoction for tooth pain. You ask what's in it. She grins. You decide not to press. As you browse the rest of the market, you see a man performing with a trained goose. It does a little dance, then bites him on the knee. The crowd laughs. You do too. It feels good to laugh. Here's a quirky little detail. Some markets had a town crier, a person paid to yell the latest news, punishments, and proclamations. Today's includes an announcement about a missing meal, a ban on bread adulterated with sawdust, again, and a warning about pickpockets operating near the well. You check your basket. Still intact. Before heading home, you stop by the blacksmith's stall. You need a new hoe head. Your old one broke during a particularly passionate weeding session. The blacksmith is burly, soot-covered, and somehow always squinting. He offers a replacement for 2 eggs and a bit of thread. You agree. The trade is made. You leave feeling oddly proud of your bartering skills. By now, the sun's dipping low. The market starts to quiet, save for the drunks who've decided this is a perfect time to loudly argue about the Crusades. You edge away. One of them has taken off his boot and is using it to emphasize his point. You begin the walk home, heavier basket, lighter mood. Your feet ache, but your mind is buzzing. You actually enjoyed parts of the day. A rare thing, considering you usually spend your time digging in mud and dodging goats. A scholarly footnote here. Some markets also doubled as marriage marts or places to seek apprenticeships. You saw a young boy today signing a contract to train with the tanner. His eyes were wide with both excitement and terror, which is pretty on brand for anything involving medieval leatherwork. Back in your village, the sky is streaked orange and purple. The air smells of wood smoke and hay. You hang up your cloak, set down your market gains, and stretch your arms. Your new hoe head gleams dully in the corner. You didn't get mugged. You didn't overspend. And no ferrets predicted your doom. That's a win. You sit by the fire with your last crumb of baked apple, thinking about the goose, the blacksmith, and Old Meg's slightly illegal potion. Today was exhausting in a different way, a whirlwind of noise, trade, and people. But you'll sleep better tonight, you think. If the goat doesn't escape again. You wake up groggy, head still buzzing faintly from the chaos of market day. The rooster's back on its nonsense, and someone's cow is mooing like it's filing a complaint. But this morning things feel off. There's a hush outside. A thick kind of quiet, not peaceful, ominous. Like the village is collectively holding its breath. You pull on your tunic and step out into the misty morning, feet crunching over frosted grass. A few villagers stand clustered near the well, talking in low tones. One of them, Tom with the missing tooth, catches your eye. "Plague in the next village," he says, eyes wide. "Ah, that explains it. Now, before you panic, remember, You don't know what the plague is. Not exactly. You just know people get sick, and sometimes they die, fast. You don't understand bacteria or fleas or how rats are involved in this gruesome drama. All you know is when someone says, plague, you wash your hands with herbs, burn something that smells bad, and hope you're not next. This isn't the Black Death yet, no skull-covered catastrophe. But smaller waves, localized outbreaks, sicknesses of all flavors are common in medieval life. And in your world, illness isn't just medical. It's moral. Divine punishment. A test. A curse. Or all three. So, what do you do? Well, first, you stop going anywhere near strangers. People start hanging charms by their doors, especially those little lead tokens with crosses or prayers etched in. Old Meg starts selling garlic necklaces again. The village priest suggests a mass and fasting, which you guess is fine if you weren't already half-starved. Your neighbor puts a dead toad in a pouch and hangs it over her son's crib. You don't ask. One of the fringe remedies making the rounds? Powdered unicorn horn. Yes, really? Of course, it's not actual unicorn. It's probably narwhal tusk ground down by some very committed charlatan. Still, it sells. People are scared, and scared people do weird things. That hasn't changed in 600 years. Your daily routine shifts. People stop gathering in groups. Market days postponed. The tavern shuts its door, and even the chickens seem more subdued. You find yourself working alone in the fields more, the wide silence of the countryside making every creaking branch feel like a threat. And then someone in your village starts coughing. It's subtle at first. Just a cough. A fever. Nothing unusual. People get sick all the time. But then someone else falls ill. And then another. Soon, the fear turns from vague to razor-sharp. Historians still argue whether these minor plagues were primarily pneumonic or some blend of other seasonal diseases, flu, dysentery, or even ergot poisoning from moldy grain. All plausible. But you? You just know the village is scared. You help dig a pit. Not because anyone's died yet, just in case. That's the thing with medieval life. It never lets you feel safe. Even the healthy prepare for death. One morning, someone nails a scrap of parchment to the church door. It's a list of things to do to avoid death. Among the suggestions: hang rosemary by your window. Avoid eating fruit. Pray at midnight. Don't wear red, it invites sickness. You note that you own one tunic. And yes, it's reddish. You sigh. The village priest, Father Ulrich, decides it's time to cleanse the soul of the town. This involves a lot of incense, hymns, and the enthusiastic ringing of bells, which he insists scares away evil spirits. You cough into your sleeve and try not to look skeptical. Here's where things get tense. You're not allowed to leave the village. The local reeve posts a warning: anyone caught leaving without permission will be fined, and maybe worse. The logic is simple: keep the sickness contained. The reality? People panic harder. The herbalist runs out of dried mint. Someone tries to sneak out under cover of night. They're caught and made to dig ditches for a week. And then the inevitable. Someone dies. You hear the wails before you hear the name. It's a child, no older than 5. Fever took him quick. His mother carries him, wrapped in linen, to the churchyard. There's no ceremony, just a prayer muttered under breath, and then earth. That night you don't sleep well. You dream of smoke and coughing and something watching from the woods. To protect yourself, you hang nettles over your door. Why? Because someone said it works. That's enough. A few families build small fires just outside their homes, hoping the smoke will purify the air. Others stop speaking entirely, retreating into their homes and shuttering their windows. One man, John with the stutter, goes into the woods and doesn't come back. Rumors swirl that he's hiding from death. Others say he met it. It's not all fear, though. In the strange way humans do, people find comfort in routine. You still gather eggs, milk the goat, check the snares. You boil water obsessively now, and herbs are added to everything, even your bathwater, which is a rare enough event that your skin doesn't quite know what to do with it. And then, slowly, the sickness fades. It never swept through the entire village, thank the saints. Maybe the garlic helped. Maybe the prayers. Or maybe it was just luck. That's the terrifying part, you'll never know. One morning, Father Elric rings the church bell just once. That's his quiet way of saying the danger has passed. People come out again. Cautiously. A smile here. A laugh there. Children begin playing again, timid at first, then with reckless joy like they've been holding their breath for days. You walk past the well and notice the flowers blooming a little too eagerly near the base. Life pushing through, even when it shouldn't. A reminder that even in fear, the world keeps turning. A fact to end on. During many plague years, dogs and cats were sometimes killed en masse because people thought they spread disease, ironically removing the very animals that could have reduced the rat population. The Middle Ages, excellent at plowing, terrible at science. Still, you survived. You didn't flee. You didn't get sick. And you didn't wear red. Maybe that counts for something. You head home, exhausted not from labor, but from tension. Fear is heavy. Even heavier than a sack of damp turnips. But the air is clear again. The birds are louder. And somewhere, deep in your bones, you feel the relief settle in like warm tea after cold rain. The village begins to hum again. It's not quite joy, but it's movement, sound, and life. People sweep doorsteps, reset their gardens, and gossip with the tentative glee of survivors. You even hear someone laugh, a full-bellied, unguarded one. It's weirdly comforting. You, however, have another problem. The harvest is coming. Now, in a world without industrial farming, chemical fertilizer, or reliable weather reports, harvest season is everything. It's the make-or-break moment that decides if the village starves through winter, or just goes mildly hungry with a side of scurvy. And guess who's helping? Yep. You. Your job starts early, before the sun claws its way above the thatched roofs. You trudge into the fields with a scythe so dull it might as well be a butter knife. You've been assigned to wheat duty, which sounds romantic if you've only ever seen wheat on a Pinterest board. In reality, it's backbreaking. The stalks cut your hands, and you develop a blister that looks suspiciously like it's planning to unionize. Your back starts to ache after 20 minutes, and you're reminded once again that medieval peasants didn't do CrossFit because they were CrossFit. And you're not harvesting for yourself, mind you. Most of this grain? It goes to the Lord's storehouses. You get a cut, sure, but it's more like a trim. Maybe a tuft. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were as miserable during harvest as we imagine. Some records suggest it was festive, a time of songs, shared meals, even flirting. Others paint a bleaker picture, long days, no breaks, looming debt. You're currently leaning toward the "this sucks" camp. The fields stretch forever. You fall into a rhythm, swing, bend, cut, stack. Every once in a while, someone shouts a joke, or someone sings a work song that makes zero sense. The goose has wed the barley, oh. You don't question it. Mid-morning break? A crust of bread and maybe a sliver of onion if you're lucky. You sit in the dirt and chew slowly, pretending it tastes like something better. Roast meat. Cheese. Cake even. You sigh. Then it's back to it. Swing, bend, cut. Try not to sneeze from the chaff. Try not to slice your own foot. Try not to think about winter. Because here's the thing, if the harvest fails, everything fails. You remember last year's stories, grain spoiled by rain, livestock stolen, a barn fire. Hunger so sharp it made people eat boiled bark and shoe leather. You hope this year goes better. You really hope. There's a fringe detail for you. Some villages believed hiring a harvest witch would bless the crop. An old woman, real or symbolic, would be given bread and cider in exchange for good weather. Your village doesn't have one, but old Meg does mutter something over a bundle of wheat before tying it to a post. Just in case. After the cutting comes the threshing. You learn quickly that beating a bundle of wheat with a stick is more exhausting than it sounds. It's not just about smashing, it's about rhythm, precision, and not inhaling so much dust that your lungs revolt. Then the winnowing, tossing grain in the air to let the wind separate the husks. It's oddly hypnotic. The golden bits drift and fall like medieval confetti. You zone out. A chicken startles you back into focus. By evening, you're caked in sweat, straw, and what might be snail bits. You want to fall over. But you help stack the bundles, tie the sheaves, and hoist them onto a cart with the strength of someone who knows there's no alternative. And then you dance. Not because you want to. Because it's tradition. Some villages mark the first finished field with a harvest dance, a mix of ritual and pure, delirious exhaustion. Someone plays a pipe. Someone claps out of time. You spin awkwardly in a circle, bumping into a girl who laughs, then into Tom with the missing tooth, who doesn't. It's absurd. It's messy. It's oddly perfect. Later there's stew. Not the sad kind, an actual hearty one, with barley, herbs, and maybe a scrap of meat. You eat it sitting on a bale of hay, spooning it from a wooden bowl, feeling like a peasant king. For once, your belly is full before bed. You sit by the fire with the others, feet throbbing, hands scratched raw, but spirits high. Someone tells a story about a fox that outwitted a nobleman. Someone else tries to sing, fails, then pretends it was a joke. You chuckle. One fact sticks with you. During harvest, medieval work hours could stretch 14 to 16 hours a day. No clocks, no overtime pay, no breaks beyond what your body demands. You collapse at night like a puppet with its strings cut. The next morning you do it again. And again. The harvest takes days. Sometimes weeks. But slowly, the grain piles up. The storehouses fill. People relax, just a little. The weight of uncertainty lifts. Winter will still be hard, but not desperate. Eventually, the final sheaf is cut. And in your village, that sheaf is treated like a trophy. Tied with ribbons, sometimes placed above the hearth, a symbol of survival and gratitude, and maybe just a bit of peasant pride. You help carry it back, arms trembling, chest puffed out. You made it. And for once, you don't go to sleep hungry, anxious, or cold. You go to sleep tired. A deep earned tired. The kind that feels almost good. You dream of fields, golden and endless. Of laughter in the wheat. Of stew that never runs out. And you don't hear the goat trying to chew your boots. Morning's light filters softly through your small window, dust motes floating like lazy dancers in the air. You blink awake to the sound of a dog barking, someone's wheezing cough, and the faint clatter of pots and pans. Life is noisy. Life is messy. And life doesn't pause, even when you wish it would. Today, your task is simple, or so it seems: mend the roof. Now, before you start picturing a leisurely afternoon with a hammer and some shingles, let me gently deflate that fantasy. Medieval roofing was anything but easy or safe. You're dealing with thatch, a material that's part dried grass, part medieval tinderbox. One wrong move and you're either halfway down a ladder or running around waving flaming straw like you're auditioning for a village bonfire. You grab the ladder. It's rickety and smells faintly of old sweat and moss. Your hands slip once, and you nearly meet the ground face first. Good times. The roof is patchy. Birds have nested, squirrels have chewed, and the last storm left a few soggy holes that might soon become leaks. Your job is to fix it before the rains return. You climb up slowly, balancing on beams that creak like an old man complaining about the weather. You tie bundles of straw into thick mats and lash them down with hazel twigs, careful not to knock anything loose. At one point, a pigeon lands next to you and stares, like it's judging your craftsmanship. You glare back. The pigeon blinks. You lose. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants roofed their homes every year or if repairs were a once-in-a-while chore. Some say it depended on your resources and how harsh the winters got. Your village leans toward annual patchwork, survival over style. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some people believe that a black cat crossing the roof during repairs brought good luck. Your village cat, a scruffy tabby named Whisper, has crossed your path twice already today. You're cautiously optimistic. Halfway through your roofing adventure, a sudden breeze picks up. You clutch your bundle of straw, heart pounding. One strong gust and the whole thing could go up like a torch. You think about the fire bans and the smell of smoke from the previous plague scare. You make it through without incident. You climb down, knees shaking but triumphant. Your fingers are splintered and sticky with sap. Your tunic smells like a hayloft. But the roof looks solid. Your neighbor, Mags, calls from below, offering a cup of weak ale and a knowing smile. You accept gratefully. After the roofing, you turn your attention to repairing a pair of worn shoes. Your boots have holes that could swallow a mouse. You sit by the fire, threading leather strips through cracked soles, using a bone needle that's seen better days. Medieval shoe repair wasn't glamorous. It was essential. People often kept the same pair for years, patching and mending until they were barely shoes anymore. The phrase, old boot, was less of an insult and more of a lifestyle. You remember old Meg's comment about foot health. She insists that sometimes walking barefoot is better, though you're not sure your feet agree. As you work, a stray dog curls up at your feet. It looks up, tail wagging lazily. You scratch behind its ears, thinking about how animals are the quiet companions of this noisy, hard life. You wonder briefly about the future, if someday there will be soft shoes, roofs that don't leak, and medicine that actually works. Then you shake the thought away. It feels like a luxury for another age. The day fades with the warmth of the fire and the soft sounds of the village settling for night. You feel the ache in your back, the sting in your fingers, and the satisfaction of a job well done. The roof will keep the rain out. Your feet might survive a bit longer. And that's enough for now. The chill of early morning creeps through your thin blankets, nudging you awake. You stretch stiff limbs and pull on your worn cloak. Today's a day for the village smithy. That familiar clang and hiss of hammer striking iron is oddly comforting, like a heartbeat echoing through stone and fire. You trudge toward the forge, dust rising with every step. The air smells of coal, sweat, and molten metal. The smith, a burly man with soot-streaked arms and a beard thick as a wool blanket, greets you with a nod. His name's Garin, and rumor says he's part giant. Your job? Fetch water from the well, keep the fire fed, and occasionally hold the red-hot iron just right so Garin can shape it into tools, nails, or horseshoes. Sounds simple until you realize that iron burns hotter than the midday sun, and the water you carry isn't just a drink, it's life or death for the forge's fire. You watch in fascination as sparks fly, metal glows a molten orange, and Garin's hammer pounds rhythmically. The ringing echoes like a song of survival and stubbornness. Historians still argue how widespread iron tools really were among peasants. Some suggest many still relied heavily on wooden or bone implements. But in your village, iron is king. A quirky tidbit, some smiths believed the forge's fire was magical, almost sacred. They'd throw bits of metal into the flames as offerings, hoping for blessings or to ward off curses. Garin once claimed his anvil was older than the village itself, though you suspect that's an exaggeration fueled by ale. At one point, the village blacksmith has to shoe a horse. Watching Garin fit and nail the horseshoe in place, you marvel at the delicate balance of force and finesse required. Horseshoes are more than armor, they're essential to the village's survival, helping horses work longer, carry heavier loads, and avoid injury. You help clean up afterward, sweeping ashes and stacking tools. Your hands smell of smoke and iron, a scent you're growing strangely fond of. Outside, the village's carpenter approaches with a broken cart wheel. The smiths often work together, the wheel repair an everyday but vital task. Without that wheel, grain won't move, firewood won't come, and the village grinds to a halt. You help wheel the cart to the workshop. Watching the interplay of wood and iron parts coming together, you're reminded that every piece in this puzzle matters. At lunch, you sit near the forge, munching on stale bread and cheese. Garin talks about his apprentices and the secret codes they used to mark tools, a sort of medieval signature. He jokes that every nail he's made has a bit of his soul in it, which sounds heavy for such a small thing. The smithy work ends as the sun dips low. You're tired but satisfied. Your role, though humble, is vital. That night, as you fall asleep, The rhythmic hammering seems to echo in your head, a lullaby forged in fire and grit. The dawn breaks soft and golden, filtering through the dense canopy of the village woods. Today, you're sent to gather firewood, a job as old as survival itself. It sounds straightforward: chop some branches, stack a pile, bring it home. But in medieval times, even wood gathering carried its own brand of peril and fatigue. You shoulder a crude axe, its handle worn smooth by generations of hands, and step into the forest. The air smells of pine resin and damp earth, alive with the calls of birds and rustle of unseen creatures. You feel small beneath towering trees, ancient sentinels watching your every move. Cutting wood isn't just about brute force. You learn quickly that the right angle, the precise swing, and timing can save your arms from revolt. Your muscles protest with every chop, but the cold winter looming demands fuel. Historians still argue whether peasants owned axes individually or shared communal tools. In some villages, axes were passed down, treasured possessions. In others, the lord's smithy controlled their distribution tightly. Your village? It's a bit of both. If you break it, you fix it. You pause to catch your breath, leaning on the axe handle, when a curious noise breaks the forest's quiet. It's a low, guttural growl, followed by the snapping of twigs. Your heart picks up, but it's only a wild boar snuffling through the underbrush. You exhale slowly. Here's a quirky tidbit. Medieval woodcutters believed that carrying a sprig of rowan tree would protect them from malevolent spirits lurking in the forest. You tuck a small branch into your belt, more superstition than strategy. But who's to argue with tradition? As you gather logs and branches, you think about how vital firewood is: heat, cooking, light, even protection from predators. Without it, the village would freeze or live in darkness. The weight of your load grows heavier, but so does your sense of purpose. You trudge back, the sun now higher, sweating under your rough tunic. Along the way, you spot a group of children playing near the village edge, throwing sticks and chasing chickens. Their laughter is a bright contrast to the somber woods. Back home, you stack the firewood neatly beside the hearth. The pile is modest but enough for a few days' warmth. You glance at the flickering flames and feel a small surge of pride. This wood will keep your family alive through the cold nights ahead. As evening falls, you rest your aching arms and watch the smoke spiral upward. It carries stories, warmth, and a promise that despite everything, life goes on. You wake to the sound of roosters crowing, the unmistakable morning anthem. Today, it's all about water, fetching it, managing it, and sometimes just dreaming of having more than the village well can offer. The well stands at the heart of your village, an ancient stone cylinder lined with moss and memories. It's the lifeline, the ever-present source of water for drinking, cooking, washing, and even for the animals. You grab a wooden bucket, rope worn and frayed, and begin the slow, familiar process of lowering it into the cool darkness below. The rope creaks in your hands. You wait for the splash, then start the laborious task of hauling the water up, heavy and dripping. Water is life, but it's also danger. Wells could harbor diseases. Contamination wasn't understood the way we do now, but the village knew to keep waste far away. Still, illnesses spread, and you wonder if the water you carry is a silent messenger. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers ever boiled their water regularly or relied solely on fresh springs and wells. The consensus leans toward mostly not, which explains a lot. You notice the faint smell of herbs tied around the well: sage, rosemary, maybe thyme, meant to purify and protect. A fringe tradition, but it makes you feel a little safer. The bucket fills and you haul it up, water sloshing over the sides, soaking your hands. You carry it carefully back to your home, mindful of spills. The village animals crowd near the well, hoping for a splash. After filling several smaller containers, you fetch water for the chickens, the goats, and the cooking fire. You dip your hands into a cool basin, refreshing yourself despite the day's heat. Nearby, women chatter as they wash clothes in a shallow stream. The scent of soapwort lingers faintly. You remember old Meg's warning that too much washing could weaken you, a superstition or a hint of medieval hygiene wisdom? In the afternoon, you help repair the well's pulley system. The rope frays, threatening a messy accident. You work with a neighbor, fingers nimble despite calluses, replacing worn parts with fresh hemp. You feel a quiet satisfaction, small fixes that keep life flowing. As the sun sets, you sit beside the well, watching its dark depths. The village gathers around, sharing stories, laughter, and sometimes worries. Water is a shared treasure, a reminder that survival depends on cooperation. You think about how something so simple, a bucket of water, shapes every part of your day. You imagine future wells, deeper, cleaner, more reliable. For now, you cherish this one. Evening drapes its quiet over the village, the sky a soft blur of purples and pinks. You settle by the fire, hands warm against the cool air, the crackle and pop of burning wood a soothing soundtrack to the day's end. Tonight you reflect on the rhythms of medieval life, the struggle, the small joys, the raw reality that would have you checking your phone for a weather update if you had one. You think about the journey you've taken, rising before dawn, hauling water, chopping wood, harvesting wheat, mending roofs, sweating beside the forge. It's a world where every day is an endurance test, where comfort is a stranger and survival a constant dance. Historians still argue whether peasants saw their lives as a series of hardships or embraced them with a quiet resilience and hope. Maybe it was both, grueling labor softened by community, superstition, and those rare moments of laughter. You recall the quirky details, the black cats crossing roofs, the rowan sprigs warding off spirits, the harvest witches blessing the grain. These traditions weren't just superstition, they were threads in the fabric of daily life, offering comfort and a sense of control in an unpredictable world. Your thoughts drift to the village children playing in the woods, their laughter a promise of continuity. You wonder how many of them will survive childhood illnesses, how many will endure the cold winters and scarce meals. The odds are never in their favor. But the fire's glow feels like a shield against the darkness outside. The stories shared, the work done together, the moments stolen for dance and song, these are the real lifelines. As the flames flicker lower, you feel your eyelids grow heavy. The ache in your body is familiar now, a badge of survival and belonging. The world outside might be harsh, but here, in the heart of the village, there is a strange, stubborn warmth. You breathe deeply, the smoke scent mingling with the night air. Tomorrow will be another day, full of chores and challenges. But tonight you rest. You rest knowing you've lasted longer than most would. You rest with the quiet pride of someone who survived a small, relentless slice of medieval life. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Wind down. Slowly, the village fades into the soft hush of night. The fire's warmth lingers on your skin, a gentle reminder that even in the hardest times, comfort exists in small measures. The sharp edges of daily struggles blur, replaced by the quiet rhythm of breathing, the steady pulse of life moving onward. You feel the weight of the day lift, replaced by a calm that settles deep into your bones. The earthy sense of straw, wood smoke, and fresh-cut grain drift softly through your senses, weaving a gentle lullaby. Close your eyes now. Imagine the fields stretching wide under a twilight sky, the whispers of leaves in a gentle breeze, the distant murmur of voices sharing stories long told. The world may be old and weary, but in this moment, it is peaceful. Let the tension melt away. Let the hard ground soften beneath you. Tomorrow's worries can wait, for now you are safe. You are part of a story as old as time, carried on the quiet wings of night. Rest easy. Rest deep. And when you wake, the sun will rise again, slow, steady, and full of promise. Good night.